Warm welcome to everyone. Very thanks for that intro to the book as well as to the three of us. I think since we have done the intros and we have to shut by 5, I'm told. 5:10? Something like that. Vivek has already told you what the book is about. The book is, if you have not seen the book already, it's on this side, that side. So it's 28 stories, I think. 28 stories from this very large and varied an eclectic mix of people from both sides, all three countries actually. Its central element is of course the partition of South Asia, you could say, or the Indian subcontinent. Not just 1947 India, Pakistan, but also 1971 was another partition when Bangladesh was formed. So it's one of these very interesting and probably for India probably the central element of our history, which defines what has happened since then to our three countries. Probably like the Holocaust is in Europe, I guess the partition is for South Asia. I don't know. But the thing is, there is, I guess, in all three countries, since then, the partition has always been a subject of debate and, movies, books, and many different mediums. But I guess this would be the first depiction in a graphic novel medium. I think so. I don't know. Vishwanath is allergic to the word first. But we'll go with that. So it's a very interesting subject. It's a very fascinating subject, and this book will obviously be available to buy. So if you like what you see, you should go and put your money where your mouth is afterwards. So what we're going to do to start off, we'll just run a small video, which is a kind of a presentation of what the book is about. In that 5 minutes, I think everybody's got a really good sense of what this book is all about. I'm going to start with you, Cyril, question answer session, just to get a sense of what the partition actually means in Pakistan, or whether it's different from what, I mean, for us in India, many of us, especially South India, don't really connect on a personal level with the partition. We know it's a chapter in history, but beyond that, I don't think anybody in South India really gets what the partition is about. In the North India, yes, families like Vishwa's family, our immediate family, all your ancestors who have been kind of involved in it, yes, they get it. But I think across the board in India, there is a sense that, and I think that's also reflected in the book, that it's something that shouldn't have happened. Like, that's one thing that's kind of unanimous in India. If you get the sentiment, right-wing loonies and left liberals, they all say that, okay, partition was actually avoidable or could have been avoided or should not have happened. Is that the same sense that is there in Pakistan on this?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here at the festival. The first time I've ever been to Goa. I've traveled through India a fair bit over the years, but never had a chance to come to this place where my mother's family is originally from and half of my father's family. So it's been exciting for me. I think I moved here to Karachi about a century ago, so much before partition. But we'll jump in straight into your question. I think partition has a much bigger presence in Pakistan than it does in India as a whole, for the simple reason, two simple reasons. One, Punjab, which is our largest province and has roughly about 60% of our population, is what was actually divided, and it continues to be the political heartland. It's the most powerful politically. Our military, which is very influential, or far too interfering, perhaps even sort of drawn predominantly from there. So you have that aspect of the Punjab division, partition of Punjab itself, physically dominating the narrative landscape in Pakistan. In addition to that, where I am from, Karachi, has a sizable migrant population that came across at the time of partition, Urdu-speaking people that we refer to as Muhajirs. Those who came from other parts of India, not just Punjab. So combined, that's about, I'd say, roughly 60-65% of your population that has a direct link to the tragedy that went down at the time of partition.
Right.
But I think within Pakistan, obviously, because we're the ones who, separated, or Pakistan did, the prevailing narrative would continue to be that partition was inevitable, and perhaps was something that was very much desirable. Now, how that narrative has been spun over the years, Pakistan is not very strong when it comes to its historical narratives and sort of cleaving to facts. But for the most part, I think within Pakistan, for an older generation, perhaps now slowly passing on because of age, that was the defining life experience for them. But now what you have, and I think, I was reading a couple of stories before coming in here, the younger generation, people in their 30s or the 20s, or even people in their 40s, given all that's happened in Pakistan, given that it's become an irreversible fact as far as Pakistan is concerned, have a slightly different perspective on partition. It's not as immediate, the pain of it.
Right.
Obviously, because travel to India and vice versa is so difficult, they don't really have that experience. Just like there's a number of people in India who have had homes in Pakistan once upon a time. There are people who had ancestral homes in India, but never really had that kind of access to it. So I think what you're seeing now is less of that intensity, the raw, perhaps, passions of what partition meant once upon a time. Just by in addition to the passage of time, but the fact that these countries have been kept so far apart despite being neighbors. There's not much interaction between the populations, and I don't think Bollywood makes up for that. But it is very popular in Pakistan.
Yeah, that's true. Vishnu, I'm going to ask you, I guess the question that gets asked every time you talk about this book is, how did it come about?
I think it came about from the fact where he left. It's because it's just the reverse in India. I mean, at least that's what I felt. I think it's very intense engagement of partition with people who are young, who are 20s and 30s, because the amount of curiosity they have is immense. When I went to Lahore, at least 5 friends called me up and said, and they gave me their addresses, that please go and visit this in this house, because that's where they've heard these stories about. So for them, a lot of Lahore, Karachi, Murshidabad, Odisha, Dhaka, they are mythical places, they are fairy tale places, because they've heard these stories again and again through their lives, and there's no way they can go there. I mean, of course they can go there, but then, they want to go there, but they don't really want to go there.
Right.
So, so for a lot of us, it's the engagement we had is a very mythical engagement, or rather grand Dadi ki kahani engagement.
Correct.
But at the same time, it's a real engagement, because whether you're Peshawari or Multani, or what kind of Punjabi are you, gets reflected in the kind of food you eat every day. And there's a Lahore ke, because the grandfather came from Lahore, and the other side came from some part of Punjab. So it's something that we negotiate with every day. So it's not a chapter in history anymore, and that's what this book really tries to plug in, is that partition is not a chapter in history anymore. It's something we're still negotiating with. And most of the stories are by 20s and 30s.
Yeah, they're all very young people, mostly. Yeah.
And
so
they
still can connect to the story.
they're talking about how they connect and how they even reprocess their own grandparents' stories.
Yes.
So for me, that was the beginning point. It was not my idea, it was my publisher's idea. And when I got this offer, I just said, yes, this is my project. So then I'm not the author of this book, I'm a curator,
You're the curator,
of the editor of this book. So for me, the idea was to get like-minded stories, or not even like-minded stories, but stories that reflect this. And what came together in a book was also a lot of revelation from different parts of the country and on South Asia, as to how we negotiate with partition differently. As you said, the curiosity walls are practically diminishing in Pakistan, but they're really rising in here. Every time a cricket team travels, we hear stories of taxi wale ne unke paise nahi liye, khana bhi khila diya, ghar pe bhi rukla diya. That's the kind of hospitality we can never reciprocate.
That's
But at the same time, it's like, wow, and people ask you, what is the food like? When I went to Lahore, people ask me, do you eat non-veg? How do you get booze freely? How much is Shahrukh charge for a film? No, I'm not supposed to know all that. But the fact remains, there's a huge amount of curiosity.
of course.
And also at the same time, it's also a certain, what do you call, boxing of memory.
Yeah, okay.
So partition means Dada Dadi ki kahani and no further.
Right.
But that's not the real thing. So that's how the book came about, is to talk to young people, get their stories, and in a medium they can feel comfortable with. And that's how we started the book.
I read in your preface that you said you've been planning not exactly this, but something to do with partition. Your Telecom was on the emergency, so it's kind of centered around the emergency. You've been planning something like this for a while.
Telecom is about the emergency, but it's not that the second book had to be partitioned. It's not that I was looking for templates of Indian history that I would chase, but it's just that the book came and I took it up. But at the same time, what happened was that I had actually started working on a book on partition on my own family history. And then I just realized it's just one little story. I mean, there's a huge backdrop and just a small little Vigo voice. And I would rather listen to so many other stories. And so when this book came out, I just wanted everyone from all the 3 countries to contribute and talk about partition.
So how did you get in touch with all these people? First of all, how did you articulate
the first part was we had an open call for entry, which was an online thing, and a lot of people did submit. But a lot of it is what the classic partition template has become, which is an academic, either academic or fictional thing. It's either an academic look or the fiction thing, which is an extension of the fiction that we've had all. And Punjabi literature, Urdu literature, or Bengali literature has a huge body of work. Yeah. So one was that, but the idea was also to, that's fine, but what is it in the living non-fiction space?
Right.
And a lot of people had apprehensions because graphic novels are equal to comics, and many of the times we find our books, whether it's in partition, emergency, sexuality, we find it in the children's book section of the bookstore. That's something we made peace with. At the same time, when people said, but how will you, it's a very serious issue, how will you convert it into a graphic novel or a comic? So I said, you send us the story, we'll do something about it. We'll we'll work around it. So many people backed out, but many people took that challenge. So that was for me the interesting part of.
I see that largely the artists are mostly India and the writer.
No, it's a bit of the both. I mean, yeah, in terms of numbers, India would be the maximum number of contributors, but there are artists from Pakistan and Bangladesh,
of course,
who have also drawn for Indian writers and vice versa.
Yes.
So it's a bit of the both.
Yeah, actually, coming to, I wanted to ask you, Cyril, because the whole graphic stories, graphic novels genre in India at least is really exploding, and compared to earlier. I mean, it's growing for people like us who follow the genre. It's exciting, the work is coming up. And I guess that means also that you had a wide range of people to go to, or from stories and people who are able to illustrate and stuff like that. How is the thing in Pakistan right now? Is it something that's picking up? A lot of big artists and...
Well, I mean, starting with children's books, we have an author of 2 illustrated children's books sitting in the audience out here, Musharraf Farooqi.
Of course, yeah.
And his wife, of course, illustrated them. Excellent books. First I just, to continue on from what Vishwa was saying, I think partition has, unfortunately, 2 parallel tracks through which they're understood. There's the political and there's the personal. And the personal, absolutely. I think even right now, the curiosity of your average Pakistani about their homes and what India is like, and they want to come here and travel, that exists. Unfortunately, the political narrative has dominated in Pakistan, and of course there's a particular history behind that, given our army has directly ruled the country and shaped national discourse on geopolitics or whatever you want to call it. But we'll stay a little away from that. About graphic novels in Pakistan, unfortunately, as Musharraf may testify, there's not much of a reading culture in Pakistan to begin with. It's much lower in terms of print publications. If you put together all of our just news publications, for example, daily, weekly, monthly, Urdu, vernacular, English, everything, you put it all together and you look at a subscription base of maybe 1 million, 1.2 million, 1.3 million for a country of 200 million. So that's a very, very tiny base to begin with. But what we instead have, and recently, again, through some foundations helped them set it up, there's this new graphic, this cartoon called Burqa Avenger, which is aimed at, which many of you must have heard about. One of the US Institute of Peace in Pakistan has helped sponsor a graphic comic series out of Karachi, which is based about sort of life in rough and tumble parts of Karachi, and sort of trying to inculcate values which they feel might help bring down crime, etc. But to my knowledge, and I have several friends who are graphic artists, but they're working more on the sort of electronic medium rather than print. That seems to be the trend in Pakistan. Perhaps because it's very tough to find a market. And maybe it's because in India it's boomed, because India has boomed over the last 15 or 20 years. And so there's more interest, there's more disposable income for people to buy these things. Whereas Pakistan has really languished or been in the economic doldrums for a long time now.
Right. Vishwa, again, a little bit more about the process of... I mean, you were curator, you also did a couple of stories in there, so you were part of the team and curating. One of the things that struck me about the book is that it's always very eclectic and different styles and different styles of writing, and all this also very harmonious. Everybody is more or less saying the same thing. In the sense, everybody is conveying that kind of a sense of loss or what if kind of feeling. And is that something conscious in your curation? Did you maybe not have stories which were a little bit jarring in the context of the rest of the book, or did you just select those that were, say, kind of, fitting in with the overall point of view?
Well, I mean, if you look at partition, usually one falls into these traps of templates, which is basically, one is memory, And if you've grown up in Delhi or Bombay or Lahore or Karachi or Dhaka, in school as a kid, if your friend said, पता है मेरे दादाजी ने कहा था उनके घर पे. You know what the next part of the story is, right? But one is that, but the other one is also speculation. What if, had we moved, what would have happened?
Correct.
Had we stayed back, what would have happened?
Correct.
Why we moved and all that. That's another thing. But for me, those are parts of the narrative. But what's for me important is to see how are we negotiating with these what ifs and हमारे दादाजी ने क्या कहा था.
Today.
So yeah, how do we negotiate with it? Like for example, there is a story about this man who's Bangladeshi, who's a Bengali, and he's a guy lives in Karachi, and in the middle of his teen years, he realizes that okay, now Pakistan is Pakistan, and we have a new country called Bangladesh, and we need to get out of this place. So it's about the secret meetings that parents have and how they're planning to move from Quetta to India, from India to Bangladesh. And you know, the other story being this house, these two friends who meet in London, and it's a Lahori and a Delhiite, and the Delhiite's family has moved from Lahore to Delhi, and the Lahori's family has moved from Delhi to Lahore, and they realize that the Lahori is now staying in the house built by the Delhiite's grandfather. So you know,
that is a really amazing story.
so and or about a Bangladeshi boy who's from Chittagong, and he's come to India to study, and then he falls in love, and the girl falls in love with him because he's from Chittagong. But when its course ends, it's not Chittagong anymore. You're a Bangladeshi, I'm an Indian. I'm not going with you there. You know, so he goes back home alone. So you know, so these are the partitions young people are negotiating with. So for me, that is what's more important. So you know, I mean, yes, loss comes up, you know, remorse comes up, but the fact remains, we've learned a way to work around that loss, you know. We are as curious to go to Lahore, we are as curious to go to Karachi. Yeah, give us the visa. I mean, really, give us the goddamn visa. Unless you're a chacha there in the Pakistan High Commission, you cannot get a visa, and it's the same with the Indian visa.
That's true.
You know, I mean, it's difficult, you know. The fact remains, you know.
It doesn't need to be. I mean,
the normal visa is the hardest to get. You can get a cricket visa or spiritual visa, which is far easier, but a normal visa is the hardest to get. But it's also, I mean, you know, this also heightens the curiosity to a very mystic level, which it need not be.
right.
You know, the people on the other side are real people of faith. वहाँ पे भी छोले भटूरे मिलते हैं, यहाँ पे भी मिलते हैं. So you know, so you know, it's that. So that's what I was interested in.
Okay, I'm getting frantic signals from back there.
10 minutes. You got 10 minutes.
Oh, we got 10 minutes. So what we're going to do is, we'll probably take a few questions from the audience. Yes.
Can you give that? Yeah. Give that to the stage.
I'm just going to tell you that perhaps I'm at a slight advantage or disadvantage as an Indian with the Pakistan connection. Number one, my father's family came from Amritsar and my wife's from Lahore. So the repercussions of the trauma that they felt was intense and prolonged, like thousands and thousands of families from, as Cyril said, the divided Punjab. So I don't know how feeling is in other parts of India, but certainly both sides of my family suffered intensely. And what I remember of their intense suffering is that they wanted to block it out.
Yes.
It was a wound so deep
Yes.
that whenever I asked my parents, who are now deceased, if they would like to go back to Pakistan, and
Yes.
there was just dead silence. Ditto my wife's parents. Government
You know, it's a
College,
very
Lahore,
classic,
Sacred Heart Convent. I often asked my mother-in-law, educated liberal Indians, Calcutta, boxwalas, businessmen, journalists, they just didn't want to revisit the past. I want to make the point also that as a journalist, I probably had greater opportunity to travel to Pakistan, about 20 to 25 trips since 1977 with Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So I had extensive experience of meeting people, the fault line of the discussion, though Jyoti's admirable and original presentation and book is amazing, is that you're not separating sentimentality from realpolitik. The dangerous part about this discussion is the ground reality and nostalgia. Nostalgia is one of the most corrosive emotions in settling. You're absolutely right about the Pakistani High Commission and visas and the terrible obstacles that are put up. I don't know if any of you know what a Pakistani visa costs. Can anyone tell me? 15 rupees. But if you go on a good day outside the Pakistani High Commission in Delhi or the Indian High Commission in Islamabad, you will find 2 crores. There is no visa, it is entirely arbitrary, it is all. So, my question to Cyril is, honestly Cyril, tell me, this terrible history of 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards, how can it be resolved? Will it be resolved?
Well, about the visa thing, I think it's a very, very much a reciprocal arrangement, as some of our attendees from Pakistan
and it's cruel, it's cruel.
They had to reschedule their flights twice. They got their visa a day after the festival started. They traveled 2 hours after getting their visa through Dubai to come to Bombay, and now they have to be in Goa and they can't go outside Goa. So it's an entirely reciprocal set of very strong constraints that both states put on each other. I actually disagree with you slightly, because I think what Vishwa's done here is that he's looking at the personal side and trying to tell about personal stories of individuals. And for too long, everything about partition and about India and Pakistan, and again, Pakistan, by the way, has gone through 2 partitions, because we also lost Bangladesh in 71, something no one in Pakistan ever wants to talk about, even less so than perhaps the older generation when it came to the original partition. It's important, I think, to keep alive those stories, because it's not nostalgia. These are roots, these are connections, these are bonds that continue to tie people together. The problem, and I was saying earlier, is that there are 2 narratives on parallel tracks functioning out here. There is the political narrative, realpolitik, as you referred to it, and then there's the personal realities of families having common roots, and pretty much in many ways, as our Prime Minister recently said, much to the chagrin of right-wingers in Pakistan, that we pretty much eat the same food, we talk pretty much the same language, we kind of... Every time I come to India, I feel it kind of looks the same, kind of feels the same, but clearly isn't the same, because Pakistan has many other realities that transcend that. But to answer your point, how will it be overcome? I think it's precisely when this narrative of a hardline narrative, a politically driven narrative, is also infused with this idea that there are real people, real stories, just regular folk trying to do business with each other, not even just come across the border to go and visit their own family homes. But one of the things that exists in Pakistan right now is an unprecedented political consensus, and I'm not including our army in that, which is influential and perhaps designs our Indian policy. But on the political front, I think whether it's the BP or the PMLN or any of the mainstream political parties, they all want better ties with India. Not just for historical, nostalgic reasons, but something as simple as trade. They understand that there's a vast market out here and vice versa. And those are the ties, I think, that need to be explored and strengthened. And that, over a period of time, will perhaps start to erode this very hawkish view that exists on both sides. And I think, well, we can't stop trying, is all I can say.
Okay, I would say also the real politics is also can be coming through real stories, because we have a few stories of stranded Pakistanis in Bangladesh who are actually Biharis who moved from Bihar to Bangladesh thinking they were going to Pakistan, and when Bangladesh became Bangladesh, then they said, we are not Bangladeshis, we are stranded Pakistanis. So and we have a few stories like that. So they are real political stories who are trying to get out of a zone which they don't want to fit into. So I think, it's not only nostalgia or memory, but it's also how we're negotiating with real politics around us. And that 15 rupees thing, but the 2-hour wait and the chacha call is real politics. Yeah, it is real politics. Yeah. So, I'm talking about nostalgia, your parents thing. It's a very classic template. There's a film by Shukra Sen called Way Back Home, where he took his parents from Calcutta to West Bangladesh. the mother went into the village, looked for her school, saw the state of the school, and she cried and she said, I wish I hadn't come here. So, it's a very real experience. And real experiences have to be recounted. That's what I think.
Okay, let's take one from Annie.
I lost track of what I was going to ask. I do remember. What I was wondering is how does a graphic novel in this case actually utilize? I mean, how do you utilize the format to do something that, say, a textual format or anthology of stories couldn't have done?
See, my take on this was that we live in a very visual world, and we come from a very common visual culture. So let people who do not do graphic novels now make graphic novels, because we are all getting a bit tired of those 5 graphic novelists we have. So that includes myself. So yeah. So it should not be India's another first Indian graphic novel. It should not be subcontinent's first graphic novel. It will just be a graphic novel. So that's why we got a few miniature painters, a few documentary filmmakers, Dastan artists, musicians, to explore this thing and then reprocess it. So a lot of the stories are actually collaborations, cross-border collaborations, and they haven't met. Some of them have interacted with each other very closely and intensely, and some of them have not. A miniature painter, she has not seen a Dastango performance ever, but she's reprocessed in her own way, and she has not interacted with all. So which is fine. So it's like, do it visually, and there is no template for a graphic novel anymore. It doesn't have to be box and balloons, and it doesn't have to be completely something esoteric. So let's just play it.
Anybody else? We've just about hit our time. So if there's no more questions, I guess we'll do a quick wrap up. There is one more. Okay, just time for one question. Yeah. Yes, Mushra.
I would like to propose a PhD thesis on how the cuisine has changed, in the partition, how...
Khilaoge?
This is the whole point, because nobody has looked at how the food has changed, as it has moved across borders in the dishes, what ingredients are used here now, how the tone of the...
I think that's is part of the thing that I really wanted in this book is something that's really gone missing. One is food and one is rivers. I mean, these are very important points of partition we are really living with. And I wish we could have used,
I was just joking.
I wish you would have contributed, Musharraf.
I can say though, having grown up eating Goan food in Karachi, it's a whole lot spicier out here than it is at home.
Okay, so is that a wrap?